Most people avoid their exes like the plague. They block their numbers, mute their socials, and cross the street if they see them coming. Me? I'm currently hanging upside down from a trellis 20 feet in the air, trying to break into his bedroom window. And it's not because I miss him. It's because Alpha Kael, the man who banished me 5 years ago, is hoarding the only synthetic wolfsbane suppressant in the state. And my bank account is looking thinner than a vegan cat. They say the line between love and hate is thin, but let me tell you, the line between dignified mercenary and wet rat clinging to a gutter is practically non-existent. I just hope he's a heavy sleeper, or dead. Dead would be convenient.
Welcome back to Z's Romance, your home for high-stakes love stories. Before we dive into today's chapter, I want to do a quick roll call. Where is the pack tuning in from today? Drop your city or country in the comments down below. I'll be checking out every one of them. All right, grab your headphones. Let's get into the story.
Chapter 1. The Trap. Rain in this part of the territory doesn't just fall, it assaults you. And it was currently trying to drown me while I shimmied along the architectural nightmare that was the Blackwood Manor's west wing. My boots found purchase on the slippery stone, and I hauled myself up to the balcony. 5 years. The scent of pine and wet earth hit me like a physical blow. It smelled like childhood. It smelled like heartbreak. It smelled like him. I shook the water from my hair, trying to ignore the way my heart was doing synchronized swimming in my chest. This wasn't emotional. This was business. I needed the meds for a client. Kael had them, and I was going to liberate them. Simple wealth redistribution. I approached the glass doors, locked, obviously. But Kael had always been arrogant. He trusted his fancy electronic keypads more than he trusted basic physics. I pulled a thin tension tool from my pocket. No weapons. Just tools, because I'm a professional, not a murderer, and slid it into the manual override slot. Click. Too easy. Kael, you beautiful, arrogant idiot. I slipped inside. The room was dark, swallowing the moonlight. It was warmer in here, the air thick with the scent of sandalwood and something distinctly masculine. I crept toward the heavy oak dresser where I knew he kept his private stash of high-value items. My hands were steady, which was a miracle considering my wolf was currently pacing inside my head, whining like a puppy who just heard the treat jar open. Shut up, I mentally snapped at her. He threw us out, remember? I reached for the drawer handle. You're putting too much weight on your left foot. The voice didn't come from the bed. It came from the armchair in the darkest corner of the room. It was deep, velvet smooth, and vibrated right through the floorboards into my soles. I froze. I didn't scream, though the urge was there. Instead, I slowly straightened my spine, putting on the mask of indifference I'd spent half a decade perfecting. And you, I said to the darkness, still have the decorating sense of a vampire with depression. Seriously, Kael? Blackout curtains. A lamp clicked on. Kael sat there, looking frustratingly composed for 3 a.m. He wasn't wearing pajamas. He was in a crisp white dress shirt, the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that looked like they were carved out of granite. He didn't look angry. He looked bored, which was infinitely worse. I expected you 3 days ago, Lena, he said, standing up. He was taller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just forgotten how much space he took up in a room. Either you're losing your touch. I got busy, I lied, crossing my arms. Traffic was a nightmare. You know how it is. I know you broke into my home. He took a step toward me, just one. It felt like the room shrank by half. Again. I'm retrieving medical supplies that you don't need and I can sell. It's called capitalism, Kael. Look it up. It's called theft. Potato. I took a step back toward the balcony. Look, this has been fun. A real trip down trauma lane. But I'm going to go now. No, he said softly. You're not. I moved to bolt, but he was a blur of motion. I didn't even see him move before his hand was on my wrist. He didn't hurt me. He just anchored me. It was like running into a wall. Let go, I snapped, trying to twist my arm free. Make me. He pulled me in, hard. My chest collided with his. When the air left my lungs in a rush, the contact was electric. A sudden, sharp jolt of static that made my teeth ache. My wolf howled, wagging her tail so hard I thought my spine would snap. Traitor! I looked up at him, glaring. His eyes were the color of whiskey held up to the light, and right now they were focused entirely on my mouth. You smell like rain, he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. And trouble. You smell like expensive cologne and poor life choices, I shot back, though my voice lacked its usual bite. Being this close to him was intoxicating. It was confusing. It made me want to bite him, and I wasn't entirely sure if it was to draw blood or something else. He didn't release my wrist. Instead, he used his free hand to reach out and tuck a strand of wet hair behind my ear. His fingers grazed my jawline. Rough and warm, I shivered. I couldn't help it. "Why did you come back, Lena?" he whispered, his thumb tracing my pulse point. "Did you really think I wouldn't feel you the second you crossed the perimeter?" "I thought you'd be asleep," I confessed, breathless. "I haven't slept well in 5 years." The admission hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. He leaned in closer, his nose brushing against mine. This was it, the fight, the rejection, the screaming match. "Now," he growled, his grip on my wrist tightening just enough to let me know I was completely at his mercy. "You're going to tell me exactly why you're here, or I'm going to remind you why you don't break into an alpha's bedroom unless you're prepared to stay." I opened my mouth to deliver a scathing retort, but the door to the bedroom suddenly burst open. "Alpha! The perimeter alarms are—" The guard froze in the doorway. He looked at Kael. He looked at me, soaking wet, pinned against his alpha's chest. Kael didn't even look at the guard. He didn't let me go. He just smirked, a dark, predatory curve of his lips that promised absolute chaos. "Get out," Kael commanded the guard, his eyes never leaving mine, and locked the door from the outside. Chapter 2. The Silver Room. The lock clicked shut with a sound that felt entirely too final. The guard's footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving a silence so heavy you could choke on it. I was trapped. In a bedroom. With my ex. If this were a rom-com, there would be a montage of pillow fights. Since this was my life, I was calculating the structural integrity of the window glass behind Kael's head. "You can stop calculating the jump," Kael said. Not even looking at me. He walked over to a side table and poured a glass of amber liquid. His hand was steady, infuriatingly so. "The glass is reinforced polycarbonate. You'd break every bone in your hand before you scratched it." "I was actually thinking about throwing the lamp at you," I corrected, rubbing my wrist where his grip had left a phantom burn. "But the lamp looks expensive, and I'd hate to ruin the resale value of your estate before I rob it." Kael turned, glass in hand. He didn't drink. He just watched me. It was that unnerving, predator stare he used to do when we were teenagers. The one that made me feel like I was the only thing in the world, and also potentially dinner. "Empty your pockets, Lena. Buy me dinner first." He didn't smile. Or he set the glass down with a sharp clink and closed the distance between us in 2 strides. Before I could dodge, he had me backed against the heavy oak dresser. "I am not playing games," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You have 3 seconds to empty your pockets, or I do it for you, and I won't be gentle." "Fine," I hissed. I reached into my tactical vest, maintaining aggressive eye contact, and slapped my inventory onto the dresser. A lockpick set, a burner phone, a small grappling hook, and a half-eaten protein bar. Kael looked at the pathetic pile, then back at me. His gaze dropped to the rest of my gear. "And the knife?" "I dropped it outside. You were there. You twisted my arm, remember?" "The other knife, Lena, the boot knife you always carry." Damn him and his memory, I sighed, bent down. Irwin unsheathed the blade from my left boot, placing it on the dresser. "And the garrote wire in your collar," I paused. "Okay, that's just showing off." I pulled the wire from the lining of my collar and added it to the pile. He stepped back, satisfied. "You haven't changed. You're still a walking armory. And you're still a control freak. Are we done? Can I go to jail now? I assume you have a dungeon? Is it damp? Are there rats? I'm allergic to rats." "No dungeon," Kael said, grabbing my arm again. This time, his grip wasn't punishing, but it was firm. He steered me toward a panel in the wall that I had assumed was a closet. He pressed his hand to a scanner, and the panel slid open to reveal a hidden elevator. "My guest suite." "Guest suite?" I scoffed as he shoved me inside. "That sounds lovely. Do I get room service?" "It's soundproof," he said as the doors slid shut, sealing us in a small mirrored box. "It has no windows, and the door only opens with my biometric scan. It's where I keep things I don't want broken or stolen." The elevator descended, down, past the ground floor, past the basement. "Kael," I said, the snark slipping for a second. "Where are we going?" The doors opened. We weren't in a suite. We were in a corridor lined with brushed steel. The air was cold and smelled sterile. He marched me to the end of the hall and swiped his palm over a panel. A heavy door hissed open. Inside, there was a bed, a toilet, and a sink. The walls were lined with a shimmering metallic mesh. Silver threading in the drywall, Kael explained, pushing me gently but firmly into the room. You can't shift in here. But you can't use your enhanced strength. You're just human. I stumbled into the room, turning back just as he stood in the doorway. The silver in the walls made my skin prickle, a low-level nausea settling in my stomach. You're locking me in a silver box, I asked, disbelief warring with anger. That's torture, Kael. It's containment, he corrected. He reached for the control panel on the outside. Get comfortable, Lena. We have 5 years of catching up to do. Kael, wait, the door slammed shut. The electronic lock engaged with a heavy thud, sealing me in silence. Chapter 3. The interrogation. I paced. 4 steps to the bed, turn. 4 steps to the sink, turn. The silver in the walls was doing its job. My wolf was silent, suppressed into a dormant corner of my mind. I felt sluggish, heavy, and painfully human. It had been 3 hours. No food, no water, just the hum of the ventilation system and my own increasing panic. Then, the hiss of the hydraulic lock. I stopped pacing and leaned against the far wall, crossing my arms to hide the way my hands were shaking. Kael walked in. He had changed out of the dress shirt into a black t-shirt that hugged his chest in a way that should be illegal. He carried a bottle of water and a sandwich. He set them on the small metal table bolted to the floor. Eat. I'm not hungry, I lied. My stomach immediately growled, a loud, treacherous sound in the small room. Kael raised an eyebrow. Your stomach disagrees. Sit. I didn't move. I want a lawyer. You're a rogue mercenary caught trespassing on sovereign pack land, Kael said, leaning back against the closed door. You don't have rights here, Lena. You have me. Lucky me. I eyed the water. I was parched. What do you want, Kael? You banished me. You made it very clear you never wanted to see me again. So why am I here and not dead in a ditch? Because he pushed off the door and took a step toward me, the casual demeanor vanishing, replaced by alpha intensity. The supplies you were stealing, they weren't just general meds. You were grabbing Neuro-X. That's a highly regulated suppressant. Who is the client? Client confidentiality, I quipped. It's in the handbook. There is no handbook. He slammed his hand against the wall next to my head. I flinched, but I didn't retreat. He was close now, too close. The silver dampened my wolf, but it didn't dampen me. I could smell him, rain, forest, and raw, angry power. Tell me, he growled, leaning down so our faces were inches apart. Who is trying to suppress a pack? It's not for a pack, I whispered, the fight draining out of me just a little. It's for the orphans in the gray zone, the shifters who can't control their turns. They're hurting themselves, Kael. I was trying to help them. He froze. His eyes searched mine, looking for the lie. He wanted to find it. He wanted me to be the villain so badly it hurt. You expect me to believe you became a thief for charity? Believe what you want, I said, my voice trembling with 5 years of unsaid words. You never believed me before. Why start now? Something flickered in his eyes. Regret? Pain? It was gone before I could catch it, replaced by a dark, volatile heat. He looked at my mouth. My gaze dropped to his lips. It was involuntary. A magnetic pull that defied logic and history. He leaned in, and I stopped breathing. You have a tell when you lie, he murmured, his voice rough. You hold your breath. I'm not lying, I exhaled, the air brushing his chin. Then why, he whispered, lifting a hand to graze his knuckles down my cheek. Is your heart beating so fast I can hear it from here? I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch against my better judgment. Because you're terrifying. Am I? His hand moved to my throat, not to choke, but to hold. His thumb pressed against my pulse. He was going to kiss me. I knew it. He knew it. The air between us crackled, hot and heavy. Then he stiffened. He pulled his hand back as if I burned him. He took a sharp breath through his nose, his pupils dilating until his eyes were almost black. What is that? He demanded, his voice dropping to a guttural growl. What? I opened my eyes, confused. That scent. He backed away, looking at me with a mix of horror and hunger. Sweet, heavy, burnt sugar and ozone. I blinked. I don't smell anything. You wouldn't, he muttered, backing all the way to the door. He looked like he was in pain. The silver blocks your senses, but it doesn't block mine. Kael, what are you talking about? He hit the door release, desperate to get out. Your heat. It's starting. Chapter 4. The scent. The silence in the room was different now. Before it was empty. Now it was heavy. I sat on the edge of the cot, my head in my hands. The silver walls were doing their job of suppressing my wolf, but they couldn't suppress biology. I felt it starting, a low, feverish thrum in my veins. My skin felt too tight. The air felt too cold. Heat. It shouldn't be happening. I wasn't due for another month. But the stress, the adrenaline, and him, being near my fated mate, had jump-started the cycle, and I was trapped in a silver box with no ventilation. I groaned and laid back on the thin mattress, curling into a ball. It was starting to hurt, a deep, cramping ache that demanded relief I couldn't give it. Outside the door, I heard voices, muffled but getting louder. "She needs to be moved, Alpha." That was a new voice, nasal, irritating. "The guards on this level are distracted. The scent is leaking through the seals." I said, "Leave it, Vargas." Kael's voice, strained, tight. "It's a security risk," the other man argued. "If the unmated males catch a whiff of a female in distress heat, we'll have a riot. We should neutralize the problem." Neutralize? Kael's growl vibrated through the steel door. "She is a prisoner. I not a rabid dog. She is a traitor, and she is tempting the pack. Let me handle it. I can administer a chemical suppressant. It's painful, yes, but effective." I squeezed my eyes shut. "Please, no. Chemical suppressants felt like liquid fire in your veins." "No one touches her," Kael snapped. "Alpha, be reasonable. You can't go in there. You know what will happen. You're unmated too. You're susceptible." "I am in control," Kael said, though he sounded like he was speaking through gritted teeth. "Are you? You've been pacing this hallway for an hour. You're growling at your own beta." A loud clang echoed, like a fist hitting metal. Silence fell. Then, the keypad beeped. "Everyone out," Kael ordered. His voice wasn't human anymore. It was pure wolf. "Clear the floor, now. Alpha, go!" Footsteps scrambled away. The heavy lock hissed. And the door swung open. Kael stood there. He looked wrecked. His hair was messy. His t-shirt strained across his chest as his muscles bunched with tension. His eyes were fully glowing, blazing gold in the dim light. He took a breath, inhaling the air of the room, my air. His chest heaved. "It smells," he rasped, stepping inside. "Like mine." "Kael, don't," I whispered, sitting up. I was shaking. "The silver. I'm defenseless." "I know." He reached behind him and slammed the door shut. He didn't lock it from the outside this time. He threw the deadbolt on the inside. He turned to me, and the look on his face wasn't the cold, calculated Alpha from before. It was raw desperation. "You have no idea," he growled, stalking toward the bed, "how hard I tried to stay away." "Then go," I pleaded, though my body betrayed me, leaning toward him. "I can't." He stopped at the edge of the mattress, his knees brushing mine. The heat radiating off him was intoxicating. "You reek of need, Lena, and I'm done pretending I don't want to answer it." Chapter 5. The Lapse. "Kael, stop," I gasped, pressing my hands against his chest. It was like trying to hold back a landslide with papier-mâché. "You hate me, remember? I'm the traitor. I'm the villain." "I know what you are," he snarled, catching my wrists and pinning them to the mattress above my head. His grip was iron, but his thumbs brushed the sensitive skin of my inner wrists, sending jolts of electricity straight to my core. "But right now, my wolf doesn't care." He didn't wait for permission. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. His stubble grazed my skin, rough and abrasive, sparking a fire that burned through the lethargy the silver walls had forced on me. "You smell like rain and betrayal," he murmured against my throat, his teeth grazing the pulse point. "Why do you still smell like home?" "Get off me," I lied. My body arched into him, betraying every word that left my mouth. The heat was a living thing now, clawing at my insides, demanding the one thing that could settle it, him. "Make me," he challenged, lifting his head to look me in the eye. His irises were swallowed by black, the gold reduced to a thin burning ring. "Push me away, Lena. Use that mercenary strength you're so proud of." I tried. I really did. I summoned every ounce of willpower I had to shove him, to kick him, to scream. But the moment our skin touched, really touched, chest to chest, heat to heat, the fight drained out of me. And it wasn't surrender, it was biological, inevitable. "Damn you," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "I hate you for this." "Good," he growled, crashing his lips onto mine. "Hate me. It makes this easier." The kiss wasn't soft. It was a collision. It was 5 years of silence, anger, and accusations poured into a single, desperate act. He kissed me like he wanted to devour me, to erase me, to own me. and I kissed him back with the same ferocity. I bit his lip, tasting copper. He groaned, a low rumble that vibrated through my chest, and deepened the kiss until I was dizzy with it. His hands were everywhere, tangled in my hair, gripping my waist, tracing the scars on my side that he hadn't put there. Every touch was a claim, every movement was a declaration of war. The silver walls hummed around us, I dampening my wolf but doing nothing to stop the man. We were enemies. We were on opposite sides of a war he started. But in this small, airless room, with the scent of ozone and musk choking the air, none of that mattered. There was no tenderness, no, I missed you. Just the frantic, messy friction of two people who had been starving for half a decade, and just found the only water source in the desert. He moved with an alpha's possessiveness, demanding everything I had, and I gave it to him because my body gave me no other choice. For a few suspended moments, we weren't the alpha and the exile. We were just Kael and Lena, trying to survive the storm we'd created. But storms always end. As the frantic energy peaked and finally crashed, leaving us both gasping and tangled in the thin gray sheets, reality didn't just return. And it kicked down the door. Kael pulled away first. He scrambled off the bed as if I were radioactive. He stood with his back to me, chest heaving, running a hand through his chaotic hair. The silence that filled the room wasn't heavy like before. It was suffocating. It was sharp. I pulled the sheet up to my chin, suddenly feeling very small and very naked. The heat had abated, settled by the act, leaving behind a cold, hollow shame. Kael turned around. The gold was gone from his eyes. They were dark, clear, and absolutely terrified. "What did you do?" he whispered, his voice shaking. "Me?" I sat up, clutching the sheet. "You're the one who broke down the door, Kael. You planned this," he accused, his voice rising, hardening into the armor he wore so well. "You came here knowing your heat was close. You knew I wouldn't be able to resist. It's a trap." "I'm not a succubus, Kael. I'm a biological organism. I can't schedule my hormones around your trust issues." "Put your clothes on," he ordered, looking at the wall, at the floor, anywhere but me. Now. Chapter 6. The Regret. The click of my belt buckle sounded like a gunshot in the small room. Kael stood by the door, his back to me, radiating waves of tension so thick I could practically see them. He had buttoned his shirt wrong, missed a hole halfway up, but I wasn't going to tell him. It was the only crack in his armor, and I was petty enough to enjoy it. "I'm dressed," I said, my voice flat. He turned. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the silver cuffs on the table. "Put them on," I stared at him. "You're joking. After that?" "Especially after that," he said coldly. "Do you think sex changes history, Lena? Do you think an orgasm erases the fact that you sold my parents to the hunters?" "I didn't sell them," I screamed, the anger finally snapping the tether of my shame. "I loved them. They were my alpha and Luna too. I would have died for them, just like I would have died for you." "And yet they are dead, and you are alive," Kael said, his voice deadly quiet. He picked up the cuffs. "Turn around?" I wanted to fight. I wanted to grab the boot knife I knew he'd left on the dresser outside and carve the truth into his thick skull. But I was tired. My body ached. My heart felt like it had been run through a meat grinder, and I was in the middle of a hostile pack. I turned around. The cold metal clicked onto my wrists. It burned, but the burn on my skin was nothing compared to the freeze in his touch. "We're moving you," he stated, grabbing my arm and marching me out of the cell. "Back to the dungeon?" I asked, stumbling to keep up with his long strides. "No, the dungeon isn't secure. The guards smelled you. If I put you back down there, I'll have 5 challenges for leadership by morning. The pack is restless." "Because of me?" "Because of us," he corrected grimly. "They know I went in there. They know I stayed. They'll smell you on me." We hit the elevator. He jammed his thumb against the scanner so hard I thought the glass would crack. "So where are you taking me?" "My quarters, top floor." "The penthouse?" I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Moving up in the world, from prisoner to mistress in under an hour. You're efficient, Alpha." He slammed me against the mirrored wall of the elevator. His face was inches from mine, his eyes blazing. "You are not my mistress," he hissed. "You are a liability. I'm putting you there because it's the only room with biometric locks that only I can open. You won't see anyone. You won't speak to anyone. You will sit there and wait until I figure out what to do with you. And if I try to leave? The windows are reinforced. The drop is 4 stories. If the fall doesn't kill you, the perimeter turrets will." The doors slid open. We weren't in a hallway anymore. We were in a massive, open-plan living space. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the forest, rain lashing against the glass. It was beautiful. It was cold. It was lonely. He dragged me to the center of the room and released me. "Stay," he commanded, like I was a dog. "Kael," I said as he turned to leave. "You can lock the door. You can cuff me. But you can't pretend that didn't happen." He paused at the elevator doors. He didn't turn around. "Watch me." The doors slid shut, leaving me alone in the most expensive cage in the world. Chapter 7. The Hostel House. The problem with luxury prisons is that they give you too much time to think. I had spent the last hour pacing Kael's living room, which was larger than my entire apartment back in the city. I'd checked the windows, locked, the balcony, locked, and the elevator, locked. I was trapped in a glass box, put on display for the moon to mock. I went to the kitchen island. No knives. Of course, he'd cleared anything sharp. There wasn't even a fork, just spoons. I considered the lethality of a soup spoon but decided against it. I needed water. I turned the tap on, gulping down a glass of tap water. Trying to wash the taste of Kael out of my mouth. It didn't work. Beep. The elevator chime made me jump. I spun around, heart hammering. Had he come back? Had he realized he was being an idiot? The doors slid open. It wasn't Kael. A man stepped out. He was slight, with slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than my car. He had a face that would have been handsome if his eyes didn't look like dead sharks. Vargas, the beta. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Lena? It's been a long time. You look well used." I stiffened, setting the glass down. "Vargas, I see Kael still keeps you around. Does he know you're entering his private quarters?" "I have override codes," Vargas said smoothly, stepping into the room. He didn't walk like a warrior. He walked like a politician. "In case of emergencies. And I'd say a rogue witch, sorry. Rogue traitor, seducing the alpha counts as an emergency." "I didn't seduce anyone," I snapped. "And I'm not a traitor. You know that, don't you?" It was a shot in the dark, but his smile faltered for a microsecond. "I know," he said, walking over to the sideboard and pouring himself a drink. "That 5 years ago, we found your signature on the transfer orders that led the hunters to the safe house. I know you ran, and I know you're back to finish the job." "I ran because Kael was going to execute me without a trial." "He should have." Vargas took a sip of whiskey. "He's weak when it comes to you. Always has been. I thought the banishment would cure him. But then I saw the security footage from the cell. My blood ran cold." "You watched?" "We all watch the security feeds, Lena. It's protocol." He set the glass down and turned to me. And his scent hit me then. Sour, oily, and wrong. He's compromised. He can't lead the pack if he's thinking with his instincts. It puts us all at risk. "So what are you going to do?" I asked, backing up until my hips hit the kitchen island. "Tell him to kill me?" "No," Vargas shook his head, reaching into his jacket pocket. "He won't do it. He's too far gone. So, I'm going to have to do it for him." He pulled out a syringe. The liquid inside wasn't clear. It was a swirling, violent purple, wolfsbane concentrate, lethal within seconds. "Vargas," I warned, looking around for a weapon. My eyes landed on the heavy glass water pitcher. "If you come near me, I will rearrange your face. You're cuffed," he pointed out, stepping closer. "And you're weak from the heat. It will be painless. I'll tell him you committed suicide out of guilt." "It's tragic, really, but necessary," he lunged. I didn't think. I grabbed the pitcher with both cuffed hands and swung it. Crash. The pitcher shattered against his shoulder, sending water and glass flying. Vargas yelled, stumbling back, dropping the syringe. I dove for it. But before I could reach it, a siren began to wail. Loud, piercing, and rhythmic. The emergency alarm. Vargas froze, looking at the ceiling. "What is that?" I gasped, snatching the syringe off the floor and scrambling back. Vargas looked at me, and for the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. "That," he said, "is the perimeter breach alarm. Someone just blew up the west gate." Chapter 8. The First Strike. The alarm blared, a rhythmic, bone-rattling pulse that vibrated through the floorboards. Vargas looked at the ceiling, then at me, then at the syringe in my hand. He swore, a crude, violent curse that didn't fit his tailored suit. "This isn't over," he snarled, straightening his tie. "Don't think you're saved, Lena. You're just delayed." He turned and sprinted for the elevator, slamming his palm against the panel. The doors slid shut, swallowing him and his cheap cologne, leaving me alone in the penthouse with a shattered pitcher and a syringe full of liquid death. "Coward," I muttered, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I scrambled to my feet. The elevator was locked down, the windows were reinforced. But the security system. I looked at the red emergency lights flashing in the corners. When a facility goes into lockdown alpha, usually the internal doors default to seal, but the fire protocols override the electronic locks on the stairwells. I ran to the main door, locked. "Come on, Kael," I hissed, kicking the heavy wood. "You're paranoid. You have to have a manual override." I didn't get to find it. The sound of shattering glass came from the balcony behind me. I spun around. The reinforced polycarbonate, the glass Kael had sworn was unbreakable, was spider-webbed. A man stood on the other side. He wasn't a wolf. He was dressed in tactical matte gray armor, face covered by a rebreather mask. He held a thermal cutter against the glass. Hunters. The glass gave way with a sickening crunch. The hunter stepped through, boots crunching on the shards. He raised a suppressed rifle, the laser sight dotting the center of my chest. "Target acquired," a digitized voice said from his comms. "Female? Unarmed?" "Not quite," I whispered. I didn't wait for him to fire. I dropped. The bullet shattered a vase where my head had been a second ago. I rolled behind the kitchen island, adrenaline flooding my system, overriding the exhaustion from the heat and the silver poisoning. I was cuffed. I was tired, but I was the shadow. I'd killed men with a spoon before. The hunter moved silently, professional. He flanked left. I scrambled right, keeping the marble island between us. I needed a weapon. I looked at the syringe in my hand. Purple wolfsbane. It killed wolves in seconds. What did it do to humans? Probably nothing good. "Come out," the hunter said, his voice distorted. "The alpha is busy dying downstairs. You're just loose ends." Kael. The thought hit me harder than the bullet would have. Kael was down there, fighting. Rage, hot and blinding, flared in my chest. I waited. I watched his shadow stretch across the floor. Closer, closer. Now. I vaulted over the island. The hunter didn't expect a frontal assault from a handcuffed prisoner. He raised his rifle, but I was already inside his guard. I kicked his knee, hard. The joint snapped with a satisfying pop. He grunted, buckling, but he didn't go down. He swung the butt of the rifle, catching me in the ribs. Pain exploded in my side. I gasped, stumbling back, tasting blood. He racked the slide, aiming for my head. I didn't have time to be graceful. I lunged, ducking under the barrel, and jammed the syringe into the soft gap between his neck armor and his helmet. I depressed the plunger. The hunter stiffened. He dropped the gun, clawing at his neck. He gargled, a wet, horrific sound, and collapsed, seizing violently before going still. I stood over him, my chest heaving, my hands were shaking. I knelt down and rifled through his vest. No keys for my cuffs, typical. But he had a tactical knife. I grabbed it. I couldn't pick the locks behind my back, but I could cut through the drywall to get to the elevator override. Or I could take the stairs. I looked at the shattered window. He had rappelled down from the roof, but the rope was still there. I grabbed the rope, testing the anchor. It held. "Hold on, Kael," I whispered, swinging my legs over the balcony ledge into the rain. "If anyone is going to kill you, it's going to be me." Chapter 9. The Poison. The ground floor of the pack house was a war zone. I swung through a broken window into the West Wing corridor, landing in a crouch. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of silver nitrate, Hunter's favorite party favor, and bodies littered the hallway. Some were hunters, some were pack. My chest ached. Every fallen wolf felt like a personal failure, even after 5 years of exile. This was still my pack. These were still my people. I moved silently, keeping to the shadows. The fighting had moved toward the Great Hall. I could hear the roars, visceral, primal sounds of wolves fighting for their lives. I rounded the corner and froze. The Great Hall, usually a place of feasts and politics, was wrecked. Tables were overturned. Tapestries were burning. In the center of the room, a massive black wolf was fighting 3 armored hunters. Kael, even in wolf form, he was terrifying. He moved like liquid shadow, tearing through the armor of the first hunter like it was paper. He snapped the neck of the second with a brutal twist of his jaws. But he was slow. Too slow. The third hunter, a massive man wielding a silver-tipped spear, saw the opening. Kael lunged, but his back leg gave out. He stumbled. The hunter drove the spear into Kael's flank. Kael roared, a sound of pure agony that shattered my heart. "No!" I screamed. I didn't think. I threw the hunter's knife I'd stolen. It wasn't a perfect throw, but it buried itself in the spearman's shoulder. He dropped the weapon, turning to look at me. That distraction was all Kael needed. He recovered, lunging forward and tearing the man's throat out. Silence fell over the hall. Kael stood amidst the carnage, chest heaving. He turned his massive head toward me. His eyes were gold, but they were dimming. He took a step toward me, then he collapsed. He shifted back mid-fall, hitting the stone floor in human form. Naked, bleeding. Kael, I sprinted across the hall, sliding on my knees to get to him. He was convulsing. The wound in his side wasn't just bleeding red. It was oozing a thick, black sludge. The veins radiating from the wound were turning black, tracking toward his heart. Back away from him, traitor! Vargas appeared from the shadows, flanked by 4 guards. He looked disheveled, a fake theatrical scratch on his forehead. You did this, Vargas shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. I saw her throw the knife. I threw the knife at the hunter, you moron, I snapped, pressing my hands over Kael's wound to staunch the flow. He's poisoned. Get her away from him, Vargas ordered. 2 guards grabbed my arms, hauling me back. No, look at the veins, I screamed, fighting them. It's nightshade compound. It causes paralysis and cardiac arrest. If you don't treat it in 5 minutes, he dies. The pack doctor, an older man named Silas, rushed over. He looked at the wound and paled. I don't have the antitoxin for this. It's too advanced. The silver content is too high. He's dying, Vargas said, his voice dripping with faux sorrow. She killed him. I can save him, I yelled, kicking one of the guards in the shin. I know the formula. I have the ingredients in my med kit in the dungeon. Let me go. Silas looked up, desperate. Vargas, if she knows? She's lying, Vargas hissed. She just wants to finish the job. Kael arched his back, a choked sound escaping his throat. The black lines reached his sternum. I looked at the guards holding me. I looked at the beta who wanted me dead. And I made a choice. If he dies, I said, my voice cold and calm. Are cutting through the panic. The pack bond snaps. You all feel it break. And when the neighboring packs smell that weakness, they will come and slaughter every single one of you. Do you want to gamble your pups' lives on Vargas's ego? Or do you want your alpha to live? The guards hesitated. They looked at Kael. They looked at me. Let her go, Silas said. Silas, Vargas warned. I said let her go, the doctor roared. Or I will testify that you let the alpha die. The guards released me. I dropped back to my knees beside Kael. His eyes fluttered open. They were glassy, unfocused. Lena, he wheezed, blood bubbling past his lips. Shut up, Kael, I whispered, tearing the hem of my shirt. Don't you dare die on me. I haven't made you suffer enough yet. Chapter 10, The Bargain. I need crushed charcoal, raw silver powder. An adrenaline, I barked at Silas. Now, the doctor didn't argue. He scrambled into his field kit. Kael was fading. I could feel his pulse fluttering under my fingertips like a trapped bird. It was erratic, skipping beats. Stay with me, I commanded, slapping his cheek lightly. Kael, focus! His eyes rolled back, the whites showing. Here! Silas slid a tray across the floor. I didn't have time to be precise. I grabbed a syringe of adrenaline and jammed it directly into Kael's chest, right over the heart. Vargas gasped. She's stabbing him. I'm jump-starting his heart, you idiot, I snarled. Kael's body jolted. A gasp of air rushed into his lungs. Good. I grabbed the charcoal and silver powder, mixing them in a small metal bowl with a saline solution. It turned into a thick gray paste. It looked like sludge. It smelled worse. Don't hold him down, I ordered the guards. What are you doing? One of them asked, though he moved to pin Kael's shoulders. Nightshade is a blood-binding toxin, I explained, my hands moving on autopilot. I have to draw it out. The charcoal absorbs the poison, the silver binds to the magic. I took a handful of the gray sludge and slammed it directly into the open wound. Kael screamed. It was a raw, animalistic sound that tore through the hall. His back arched off the floor, muscles straining against the guard's grip. The paste sizzled as it touched his blood, smoking as if I'd applied acid. Hold him, I yelled, pressing down harder. It has to set. You're killing him, Vargas shouted, drawing a gun. That's enough. No, Silas stepped in front of the gun. Look, Vargas froze. The black veins on Kael's chest were receding, and the sludge in the wound was turning a vile, oily black as it leached the poison from his system. Kael stopped screaming. He collapsed back onto the stone, his breathing ragged but steady. The frantic fluttering of his heart smoothed out into a strong, rhythmic beat. I slumped back, wiping sweat and blood from my forehead with the back of my hand. My cuffs were still dangling from one wrist, where I'd managed to pick the lock on the stairs. He's stable, Silas announced. Checking Kael's pupils, he looked at me with awe. I've never seen that field dressing before. Mercenary trick, I muttered. You learn a lot when you don't have a pack hospital to run to. I looked at Kael. He was unconscious, pale, and covered in grime, but he was alive. Take him to the infirmary, Vargas ordered, holstering his gun, his face a mask of cold fury. And put her back in the cell. The guards reached for me. I was too tired to fight. I'd spent every ounce of adrenaline I had saving the man who hated me. Wait. The voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Kael's hand shot out. He gripped my wrist, hard. His eyes opened. The gold was back. It wasn't the hazy dying gold of moments ago. It was sharp, lucid, and possessive. Alpha, Vargas stepped forward. She attacked you. We need to secure her. Kael ignored him. He ignored the doctor. He ignored the burning hole in his side. He only looked at me. She doesn't go to the cell, Kael rasped. But sir, she stays, Kael growled, his grip tightening until it was almost painful. He pulled me down until my ear was hovering over his lips. You saved me, he whispered. That's his voice rough with pain and something else I couldn't place. Don't read into it, I whispered back, trying to pull away. I just didn't want Vargas running the place. Liar, he murmured. He looked up at the guards, his eyes flashing dangerous fire. Take me to my room, Kael commanded. And she comes with me. If anyone tries to separate us, tear their throat out. Chapter 11. The Vigil. The sun was trying to rise, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gray, which felt appropriate given the state of the room. I sat in the armchair beside the massive bed, watching Kael breathe. It was a terrifyingly fragile thing to watch. For 5 years, I'd imagined him as this invincible monster who ruined my life. Seeing him pale, sweating, and vulnerable was messing with my head. He hadn't let go of my wrist for 4 hours. Even in his fever dreams, his grip was iron. I had bruises forming in the shape of his fingers. I didn't mind. It was the only thing keeping Vargas from dragging me back to the silver cell. You're staring, a rough voice rasped. I jumped. Kael's eyes were open. The gold was dull, but clear. I'm monitoring, I corrected, trying to pull my hand away. He tightened his grip, tugging me forward until I was leaning over the mattress. Checking for necrosis. The paste worked, but you're not out of the woods. You stayed. You didn't give me a choice. You practically handcuffed yourself to me. He looked at our joined hands, then back at my face. He didn't let go. Why, Lena? Why what? Why save me? He tried to sit up, groaning as the movement pulled on his wound. I instinctively reached out to steady his shoulder. His skin was burning hot. You hate me. You have every right to let me die. If I were you, I might have let me die. I considered it, I admitted, my voice quiet. Whatever you think I did 5 years ago, I didn't. I didn't sell them out. I didn't betray the pack. The evidence was paper. I cut him off. It was a signature on a transfer order, a signature that can be forged. Did you ever ask me? Did you ever look me in the eye and ask if I did it? Kael fell silent. The memory hung between us, heavy and sharp. He hadn't asked. He had just reacted. Rage, grief, and the blinding pain of losing his parents had turned him into an executioner. I was a coward, he whispered. It was an admission that shocked me to my core. Alphas didn't admit fear. I was afraid that if I looked at you, I wouldn't be able to do what the law required. I was afraid I'd choose you over justice. So you chose neither, I said bitterly. You chose wrong. He looked at me then, really looked at me. His gaze traced the scar on my jaw, the exhaustion under my eyes, the defensive set of my shoulders. He reached up with his free hand. I flinched, expecting a strike. He froze. A look of shattered devastation crossed his face. You think I'd hurt you? You banished me to the wilds, Kael. The only reason I'm alive is because I learned to hit first. He dropped his hand. I never wanted you dead, Lena. I just wanted you gone. Because looking at you hurt. And now, he murmured, his thumb brushing the pulse point of my wrist. The idea of you being gone hurts worse. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't the aggressive, heat-fueled lust from the cell. It was something heavier. Something dangerous. Hope? I opened my mouth to tell him about the hunter's phone, about the inconsistencies I'd found in his security, about Vargas. Knock, knock. The door swung open before Kael could answer. Vargas strode in, flanked by 2 fresh guards. He looked annoyingly pristine. Alpha, Vargas nodded, his eyes flicking to our joined hands with a sneer. Glad to see you're awake. The council is demanding a report on the breach, and they want the prisoner secured. Kael's grip on my wrist didn't loosen. The prisoner is securing me, Vargas. Leave. Sir, with all due respect, she is a security risk. We found a hunter's knife in her possession. The knife she used to save my life? Kael asked, his voice gaining strength. A convenient narrative, Vargas countered smoothly. Or perhaps a way to gain your trust so she can finish what she started 5 years ago. We found this in her pocket. Vargas held up a small black device. It was the burner phone I'd found in the trash, the one communicating with the hunters. Found this on her during the search, Vargas lied. It has direct messages to the hunter captain. I went cold. He was framing me. Again. Kael looked at the phone. Then he looked at me. Chapter 12. The Doubt. The silence stretched so thin I thought it would snap and take my head off. Kael took the phone from Vargas. He scrolled through the messages. His face was unreadable. The stone mask was back. Direct coordinates to the west gate, Kael read aloud. Timestamps matching the explosion. She coordinated the attack from the inside, Vargas said, sounding almost bored with how obvious it was. She's been playing you, Kael. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just watched Kael. If he believed this, if he believed I was capable of killing his pack after I just almost died saving him, then there was nothing left to fight for. Kael looked at the phone. Then he looked at the timestamps. Vargas, Kael said slowly. This message was sent at 3:04 a.m. Exactly, Vargas nodded. Right before the breach. At 3:04 a.m., Kael said, his eyes lifting to meet his betas. Lena was handcuffed to my bed frame in the West Wing. I know because I was the one who put the key in my pocket. Vargas blinked. She could have voice activation or a timer. On a burner flip phone from 2010? Kael raised an eyebrow. Technologically unlikely. She's the shadow, Vargas argued, losing his cool. She has tricks. She does, Kael agreed. We handed the phone back to Vargas. But she doesn't have telepathy. Get out, Vargas, and take your evidence with you. I'll conduct my own investigation. Vargas turned purple. He opened his mouth, closed it, glared at me with pure venom, and spun on his heel. The door slammed shut. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. You believe me? I believe in logistics, Kael muttered, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. He hissed in pain but pushed through it. And I believe that if you wanted me dead, you wouldn't have used charcoal and silver to pull poison out of my veins. He stood up, swaying slightly. I was at his side instantly, my shoulder under his arm. What are you doing? I asked. You need to rest. I need to see the security logs, he gritted out. Now help me to the desk. We hobbled across the room to his massive mahogany desk. He sat down heavily and flipped open his laptop. Vargas has been my beta for 10 years, Kael said, typing in his passcode. Accusing him of treason it's impossible. Is it? I asked, leaning over his shoulder. Who benefits if you die, Kael? Who takes over until a new alpha is challenged? The beta, he whispered. He pulled up the server logs for the West Gate. Red lines of code scrolled past. Look there, I pointed at the screen. The gate didn't fail because of an explosion. The magnetic locks were disengaged before the detonation. Kael frowned. That requires a level 5 clearance code. Only I have that. You and anyone you gave emergency override access to, I reminded him. Like your beta. He typed in a command to trace the user ID. The screen buffered. User ID, alpha_prime. Kael slumped back. It was my code. It says I opened the gate. Or someone who cloned your signature, I said. Kael, look at the IP address of the command. He squinted. It's internal. It's not just internal, I tapped the screen. That IP prefix, 192.168.0.55. That's not the security hub. That's the hardline connection in the East Wing guest suite. Kael went still. Vargas stays in the East Wing, he said, his voice void of emotion. Bingo, I whispered. He stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in his eyes. The denial was breaking. The trust was crumbling. If he opened the gate, Kael said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage, then he let the hunters in. He killed my men. He killed my parents? He looked at me. The realization was a physical blow. If Vargas was the traitor, then 5 years ago. I exiled you for something he did, Kael choked out. We don't have proof of the past yet, I said, keeping him focused, but we have proof of tonight. I'm going to kill him, Kael stood up, his claws extending. No, I grabbed his arm. If you kill him now, the hunters he's working with will go underground. We need to know the full plan. We need to catch him in the act. How? I smirked. A dark, dangerous curve of my lips. We're going to give him exactly what he wants. We're going to let him think he's won. Chapter 13. The Alliance. The plan was simple, dangerous, stupid, and likely to get us both killed, but simple. We spent the next 6 hours turning Kael's bedroom into a war room. Outside, the storm raged on, mirroring the chaos inside the pack. Inside, it was quiet, intimate. Kael was sitting on the floor, surrounded by blueprints of the compound. I was on the bed, cross-referencing hunter chatter I'd decrypted from the burner phone. You realize, Kael said, tracing a line on the map, that if this goes wrong, Vargas will have the council sanction my execution for incompetence. And mine for existing, I replied, not looking up. High stakes make life interesting. You've changed, he noted. I looked up. He was watching me again, not with suspicion, but with a curiosity that felt more dangerous than his anger. I had to, I said. The girl you banished wouldn't have survived the wilds for a week. I had to become someone else. I miss her, he said softly. The girl. She's dead, Kael. Is she? He stood up and walked over to the bed. He moved better now, the werewolf healing factor kicking in. And he stopped at the edge of the mattress. Because when you were saving my life, you didn't look like a mercenary. You looked like my mate. The word hung in the air. Mate. He hadn't said it out loud since the capture. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the mattress on either side of my hips, trapping me. We have a job to do, I reminded him, my voice breathless. The job can wait 5 minutes. He leaned in, his nose brushing mine. The scent of him, spices, rain, and power filled my senses. My wolf purred, a traitorous sound that vibrated in my chest. Kael, I warned, placing a hand on his chest. We are not doing this. Not while Vargas is out there plotting to kill us. Maybe that's why I want to, he murmured, his lips grazing my jawline. Because we might be dead tomorrow. He kissed the sensitive spot behind my ear. I shivered, my head falling back involuntarily. It was a mistake. He took it as an invitation. He kissed down my neck, his stubble scraping my skin, his hands tightening on the sheets. Stop, I whispered, though I didn't push him away. Tell me to stop, he challenged, moving to my throat. Tell me you don't want this. Tell me you don't feel the bond pulling us together like gravity. Beep, beep, beep. The laptop on the desk started screaming. Kael groaned, resting his forehead against mine. I'm going to destroy that computer. It's the signal tracker, I gasped. Sliding out from under him, I needed distance. I needed air. I needed to not jump his bones. I ran to the desk. Kael followed, looking frustrated and unfairly hot with his hair messed up. What is it? He asked. Not the signal from the burner phone, I pointed at the jagged waveform on the screen. It just went active again. Someone is transmitting. Vargas? No, I shook my head. Vargas is in a council meeting right now. I checked the schedule. He can't be using the phone. Then who? I adjusted the frequency. The audio cleared up. It was a voice, distorted, low, but distinct. Phase 2 is a go. The alpha is weakened. The girl is in custody. Strike at midnight. Kael went rigid. That's not Vargas. No, I agreed, a cold pit forming in my stomach. That voice, I know that voice. Who is it? I looked at Kael, dread pooling in my veins. That's Silas, the pack doctor. Kael stared at me. Silas. He saved me. He gave you the adrenaline. He gave me the adrenaline because he had to, I realized. The pieces clicking into place. But he's the one who declared the poison fatal. He's the one who has access to every wolf's medical weakness. Vargas isn't the mastermind, Kael. Vargas is just the muscle. Silas is the brain. Kael grabbed his jacket. We need to get to the infirmary, now. Wait, I grabbed his arm. Look at the transmission source. The red dot on the map wasn't coming from the infirmary. It was blinking steadily from a location deep underground. That's the old tunnels, Kael said, his face paling. We sealed those off years ago. Apparently not, I said, grabbing the boot knife from the table. Because that's where the invasion force is waiting. Chapter 14. The Descent. The entrance to the old tunnels was located behind a false wall in the wine cellar. Because apparently, Kael's ancestors had a flair for the dramatic. You really need to update your security, I whispered, watching Kael shove a heavy oak cask aside to reveal the damp, gaping mouth of the tunnel. A false wall? What is this, Scooby-Doo? It's effective, Kael grunted, wiping dust from his hands. No one has been down here in 20 years. Except for the army of hunters currently planning your demise, I pointed out, flicking on my tactical flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow, stone-lined passage dripping with condensation. It smelled like wet earth and rot. "Ladies first," Kael gestured. "Chivalry isn't dead," I muttered, stepping into the gloom. "It just lives in a sewer." We moved in silence. The air grew colder the deeper we went. I could hear Kael breathing behind me, a steady, rhythmic sound that was strangely comforting. And in the tight confines of the tunnel, his scent was overwhelming, cedar and rain cutting through the mildew. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and not just from fear. "Stop," Kael whispered, his hand clamping onto my shoulder. I froze. "What?" "Listen." I strained my ears. At first, I heard nothing. Then, a faint drip, drip, drip. And something else. A low electrical hum. "That's not water," I said. "That's a generator." We crept forward, rounding a sharp bend. The tunnel opened up into a cavern that used to be a storage root cellar. Now, it looked like a bomb maker's workshop. Portable floodlights illuminated the space. There were crates stacked against the walls, crates marked with the insignia of the Hunters Guild. But it was what stood in the center of the room that made my blood run cold. That it was a massive structural pillar, one of the main supports for the pack house above. Strapped to it were bricks of C4 plastic explosive, wired to a digital timer. "Mother of," Kael breathed, stepping up beside me. "Don't touch it," I hissed, grabbing his wrist before he could reach for the wires. "It has a mercury tilt switch. You sneeze wrong and we're pink mist." "They're going to bring down the house," Kael said, his voice hollow. "Everyone inside, the pups, the elders." "Silas," I spat the name like a curse. "He's not just staging a coup, he's staging a massacre." We moved closer to the bomb. The timer counted down in ominous red LEDs. 00:45:00. 45 minutes, Kael said. "We have to evacuate." "If we sound the alarm," I argued, inspecting the wiring. "Silas detonates it early. He has a remote trigger, and I guarantee it. So we disarm it." "I'm a thief, Kael, not a bomb squad," I said, my hands hovering over the complex web of red and blue wires. "I can pick a lock, I can crack a safe, but this is military grade." "You can do it," Kael said. He wasn't looking at the bomb, he was looking at me. "I've seen you work, you're the best there is. Don't try to flatter me while we're standing next to high explosives." "I'm not flattering you, I'm trusting you." He stepped closer, his chest brushing against my back. He reached around me, not to touch the bomb, but to hold the flashlight steady. His arms caged me in. The heat radiating off him was distracting, terrifying, and exactly what I needed to focus. "Okay," I exhaled, pulling a pair of wire cutters from my belt. Blue wire usually controls the timer, red is the power, yellow is usually a trap. Usually? Science is an art form, Kael. Shut up. I brought the cutters to the blue wire. My hand trembled slightly. "Steady," Kael whispered, his lips grazing my ear. "I've got you." I took a breath. I squeezed the handle. Snip. The timer didn't stop. Instead, it started beeping faster. 00:10:00. 00:09:59. "That wasn't the timer," I said, panic rising in my throat. "That was the accelerator." "Run?" Kael asked calmly. "Run," I confirmed. But before we could turn, a metal grate slammed down over the tunnel exit. A voice crackled over a hidden intercom system. It was smooth, clinical, and chilling. "I told them you'd find it," Silas's voice echoed through the cavern. "Your persistence is scientifically fascinating, Lena, but ultimately fatal." Chapter 15. The Trap. "Silas," Kael roared, throwing his weight against the iron grate. It didn't budge. "Open this gate and face me like a wolf." "I am a man of science, Alpha," Silas's voice purred from the speakers. "I prefer to let my experiments do the fighting." A heavy grinding sound echoed from the shadows at the far end of the cavern. A secondary door, one I hadn't noticed behind the crates, began to lift. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the floor. It didn't sound like a wolf. It sounded like a machine trying to replicate a wolf and failing. "What is that?" I whispered, backing up until my back hit Kael's chest. "I don't know," Kael said, stepping in front of me, shielding me. "But it smells like death." 3 creatures emerged from the darkness. They were wolves, or they had been once. They were massive, hairless, with skin that looked gray and necrotic. And metal implants protruded from their spines, pulsating with a sickly green light. Their eyes were gone, replaced by optical sensors. "Ferals," I realized, feeling sick. "He's been experimenting on the Omegas, turning them into bioweapons." The center creature let out a shriek that sounded like tearing metal and lunged. "Get back!" Kael shouted. He shifted mid-stride. It was a violent, seamless transition. 1 second he was a man. The next, he was a massive black wolf, colliding with the feral in midair. The impact shook the ground. Kael was bigger, stronger, a pure-blooded alpha, but the feral didn't feel pain. It clawed at Kael's face with metallic talons, tearing at his fur. The other 2 ferals circled, their sensors locking onto me. "Come on, you ugly bastards," I yelled, pulling my boot knife. Oz had felt woefully inadequate against cybernetic zombies, but I wasn't going down without a fight. One of them sprang. I dropped to my knees, sliding under its leap, and slashed upward. The blade skidded off a metal plate in its chest. Damn it! The creature landed and spun, backhanding me. The blow sent me flying into a stack of crates. I hit the wood hard, the air leaving my lungs. I gasped, trying to stand, but the feral was on me. It pinned me down, snapping its jaws inches from my face. Its breath smelled of chemicals and rot. I braced for the bite. Suddenly, a blur of black fur slammed into the feral. Kael. He tore the creature off me, throwing it across the room like a rag doll. He stood over me, snarling, daring them to come closer. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his black fur matted with red. But he looked magnificent. He looked like a god of war. The timer on the pillar beeped relentlessly, 00430. "Kael," I shouted, scrambling up. "We can't win this. The bomb." He snapped his jaws at the remaining feral, keeping it at bay, and looked back at me. His eyes were wild, but he understood. We needed an exit. I looked around frantically. The grate was sealed. The blast doors were blocked by the monsters. Then I saw it. A ventilation shaft near the ceiling. It was small, high up, and covered by a rusty fan blade. "The vent," I pointed. Kael understood immediately. He didn't shift back. He lowered his body, signaling me to climb on. I vaulted onto his back, gripping his thick fur. He launched himself. We soared over the heads of the ferals. Kael hit the wall, digging his claws into the stone, scrambling up the vertical surface with impossible strength. Then we reached the vent. I kicked the rusty fan. It groaned but didn't break. "Harder," I yelled at myself, kicking again. Below us, the ferals were climbing the crates, snapping at Kael's tail. I kicked one last time. The fan tore loose, clattering into the darkness below. I scrambled into the shaft. Kael followed, shifting back to human form mid-squeeze, to fit his broad shoulders through the opening. He pulled himself in, kicking a feral in the face as it tried to grab his ankle. We were in. "Go," Kael rasped, pushing me forward. Crawling speed is not an option. The shaft was tight, dusty, and endless. We scrambled on hands and knees, scraping skin, fueled by pure adrenaline. Behind us, in the cavern, the beeping reached a solid tone. Beep! Chapter 16. The Collapse. Boom. The sound wasn't just a noise. It was a physical force. As the shockwave hit us like a sledgehammer, the ventilation shaft buckled. I was thrown forward, my chin hitting the metal floor. Kael slammed into me, shielding my body with his own as the world turned into dust and noise. The tunnel behind us collapsed. The roar of falling stone was deafening. We actually slid, down the tilting shaft as the building's foundation shifted. It was like going down a slide made of razor blades. Then we ran out of metal. We spilled out of the vent, tumbling onto a polished marble floor. We rolled, tangled together, crashing into a velvet sofa. I coughed, waving away a cloud of plaster dust. We were in the Great Hall, or what was left of it. The floor was tilted at a 10-degree angle. Cracks ran up the walls like lightning bolts. The chandeliers were swinging violently, but the building was still standing. We're alive, I wheezed, checking my limbs. The main charge. It must have been deep enough that the bedrock absorbed most of it. Kael groaned, rolling off me. He was covered in gray dust, blood, and sweat. He looked at the cracks in the walls. Silas failed. "Not yet," a voice boomed. We looked up. At the top of the grand staircase, which was now dangerously crooked, stood Silas and Vargas and 50 armed guards. But they weren't aiming at the hunters. They were aiming at us. Vargas stepped forward, looking every bit the grieving leader. He held a microphone, addressing the pack members who were stumbling into the hall from the upper levels, confused and terrified. "Brothers and sisters," Vargas shouted, pointing an accusing finger at us. "Behold the traitors." A gasp went through the crowd. "We found them in the tunnels," Vargas lied smoothly. "They planted the explosives." They tried to bring the pack house down on top of us while we slept. Liar, I screamed, standing up, swaying on my feet. It was you. We tried to stop it. Did you? Silas stepped forward, holding up a tablet. He projected a video onto the wall. It was grainy security footage. It showed me entering the tunnel. It showed me kneeling by the bomb. It showed me holding the wire cutters. But the audio was doctored. Instead of me saying, "I'm disarming it," the audio played a spliced recording of my voice saying, "Set the timer. Let's burn it all down." My blood turned to ice. They had been recording. They had edited it in real time. "Deep fake," I whispered. "It's a deep fake," the pack growled. A low collective rumble of betrayal. As they looked at Kael, their alpha, standing beside the traitor. "Kael," Vargas shouted. "Step away from her, renounce her, and we will show you mercy. Admit she bewitched you." Kael stood up. He wiped the blood from his mouth. He looked at the guards. He looked at the pack who looked ready to tear him apart. Then he looked at me. He reached out and took my hand. He interlaced our fingers, holding tight enough to bruise. "She is my mate," Kael roared, his voice silencing the room. "And if you want her, you have to go through me." Vargas smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just won the lottery. "So be it," Vargas said. "Kill them both." Chapter 17. The Standoff. "Kill them both," Vargas ordered again, his voice cracking with desperation. 50 laser sights dotted Kael's chest and my forehead. It looked like a constellation of death. But nobody pulled the trigger. The guards stood frozen, their hands trembled on their rifles. Their wolves were warring with their orders. You can lie to a man, you can show him deep fake videos and doctor audio logs, but you cannot lie to a wolf. Their instincts were screaming that Kael was alpha. Attacking him went against every biological imperative wired into their DNA. "What are you waiting for?" Silas shrieked, tapping furiously on his tablet. "Shoot them! They are terrorists!" "They are your alpha," I yelled back, my voice raw. "Look at him. Does he look like a traitor? He's shielding you. He took the blast for you." A young guard in the front row lowered his weapon. "She's right. He's protecting her. Alphas don't protect traitors." "He's compromised," Vargas roared. He pulled a heavy revolver from his waistband. "If you cowards won't do it, I will." He didn't aim at Kael. He aimed at me. Bang. The sound was deafening in the enclosed hall. I didn't feel the bullet. I felt Kael. He moved faster than thought. He spun, wrapping his body around mine, twisting us so his back was to Vargas. Thud. Kael grunted, a sharp, wet sound. The bullet hit him in the shoulder, the same shoulder Silas had just patched up. The smell of fresh blood, alpha blood, hit the air. That was the breaking point, but not the way Vargas intended. The sight of their alpha bleeding by the beta's hand didn't make the pack attack us. It made them snap. "He shot the alpha," someone screamed. Chaos erupted. Half the guards turned on Vargas. The other half, confused and panicked by Silas's shouting, opened fire indiscriminately. "Run," Kael growled, grabbing my hand. He didn't run away from the fight. He ran through it. He bulldozed 2 confused guards, using his massive shoulder to knock them aside like bowling pins. We weren't retreating. We were repositioning. "The armory," Kael shouted over the roar of gunfire. "We need weapons." We sprinted down the east hall. Bullets chipped the stone walls around us. I grabbed a discarded tactical shield from the floor, holding it over our heads as we ran. "You're hit," I yelled, seeing the dark stains spreading on his back. "I've had worse," Kael lied. He was pale, his skin clammy. The adrenaline was the only thing keeping him upright. We skidded around the corner to the armory door. Kael slammed his palm against the scanner. "Access denied. Lockdown initiated." "Silas lock-blocked us," I cursed. And I dropped the shield and pulled the lockpick set from my pocket, the one Kael had confiscated and then returned during our truce. "Cover me, I need 10 seconds. "You have 5, Kael snarled, turning to face the corridor. Vargas's loyalists were rounding the corner. Kael let out a roar, a true alpha command. "Stay back!" The lead guards stumbled, their knees buckling under the sheer weight of his authority, but Silas was ready. A high-pitched screech emitted from the hallway speakers, a sonic dampener designed to neutralize alpha vocal frequencies. Kael clutched his head, roaring in pain. "Got it!" I screamed as the tumbler clicked. I kicked the door open, grabbed Kael by his good arm, and dragged him inside. I slammed the heavy steel door shut and threw the manual deadbolt just as the first wave of bullets hammered against the metal. We were safe, for now, but we were trapped in a windowless steel room with no exit, while the man who wanted us dead controlled the building. "Check the inventory," Kael wheezed. sliding down the wall to sit on the floor. He looked bad. Tell me we have something bigger than a handgun. I scanned the racks. They were empty. Kael, I whispered, my stomach dropping. The racks. They're stripped. What? Vargas, I realized, looking at the empty shelves where the assault rifles and grenades should have been. He didn't just frame us. He disarmed the pack. He moved the weapons. Kael closed his eyes, his head thumping back against the steel door. Why? Why disarm his own people? Because, I said, walking over to him and kneeling down. He isn't planning on winning a civil war, Kael. He's planning a slaughter. Chapter 18. The Truth. Wow, he sold us out, Kael rasped. Not just me, everyone. I ripped the hem of my tank top, creating a makeshift compression bandage. Lean forward, he grunted as I pressed the cloth against the bullet wound in his shoulder. It was a through and through, thankfully, but he was losing blood he couldn't afford to lose. The hunters, I said, tying the knot tight. Vargas moved the weapons so the pack couldn't fight back when the hunters breach. He's not taking over the pack, Kael. He's liquidating it. Kael opened his eyes. They were burning with a cold, terrifying clarity. My parents. I froze. 5 years ago, Kael said, his voice steady despite the pain. The weapons cache was empty then too. We thought it was a supply error. It was Vargas. He disarmed the safe house before the hunters arrived. He looked at me, and the hatred and suspicion that had defined our relationship for half a decade evaporated, leaving only a raw, bleeding regret. I banished the only person who was trying to save them, he whispered. He reached up, his bloodied hand cupping my cheek. I sent you away to rot in the wilds, Lena. I called you a traitor, and all this time, the snake was sleeping at the foot of my bed. Kael, don't, I said, my voice trembling. We don't have time for the guilt trip. I need to say it, he insisted, his thumb stroking my jaw. I am sorry. I broke our bond. I broke your trust. I don't deserve you defending me. I don't deserve you bleeding for me. You're right, I said, a tear escaping despite my best efforts. You don't, but you're my mate, and I'm not letting you die today. If we die, he murmured, pulling me closer until our foreheads touched. I need you to know I never stopped. Even when I hated you, I loved you. The moment was shattered by a massive clang. The steel door buckled inward. They have a battering ram, I said, jumping to my feet and grabbing a combat knife, the only weapon left in the room, likely forgotten on a workbench. Help me up, Kael commanded. You can't fight. I am the alpha, he growled, grabbing my hand to haul himself up. I fight until I'm dead. Clang. The hinges screamed. We need an exit, I scanned the room. Vents are too small, door is blocked. The floor, Kael said, pointing to a grate in the corner. The munitions chute. It drops to the loading bay. That's a 20-foot drop onto concrete. Better than a bullet. He limped over to the grate and tore it open with his alpha strength. Our muscles straining. Crash. The armory door flew off its hinges. Vargas stepped in, stepping over the twisted metal. He wasn't holding a gun anymore. He was holding a remote detonator. Touching, Vargas sneered, looking at us huddled by the chute. Really, it brings a tear to my eye. It's over, Vargas, Kael shouted. The pack knows. You shot me. The pack is confused, Vargas corrected. And in about 5 minutes, the pack will be dead. I just signaled the hunter vanguard. The perimeter is down. They are coming to wipe Blackwood off the map. Why? I screamed. It's your home. It's a sinking ship, Vargas yelled back, his composure cracking. Werewolves are dying out, Lena. The hunters are winning. I made a deal. I give them Blackwood, and they give me a seat at the table in the New World Order. Our survival of the fittest. He raised the detonator. Goodbye, Alpha. He pressed the button. Nothing happened. Vargas frowned, clicking it again. I smirked, holding up the small black jammer I'd swiped from the hunter's belt back in the penthouse. Military-grade signal jammer. Never leave home without it. Vargas's face went pale. Now, Kael shouted. He grabbed me and threw us both down the munition chute, just as Vargas pulled his gun and fired. The bullet sparked against the metal rim as we plummeted into the dark. Chapter 19. The Siege. We hit the loading bay floor hard. I rolled, absorbing the impact, but Kael landed heavily on his bad side. He groaned, staying down for a second too long. Up, I urged, pulling him. He's coming. But it wasn't Vargas who came next. The massive bay doors at the end of the room exploded inward, and a convoy of armored trucks smashed through the metal, screeching to a halt. The back doors flew open, and soldiers poured out. Not the stealth assassins from before. These were shock troops. Heavily armored flamethrowers, heavy machine guns. The siege had begun. Alert the pack, Kael ordered. We need to rally the defense. The comms are down, I shouted over the noise of the trucks. Silas jammed everything. Then we do it the old way, Kael snarled. He threw his head back and let out a howl. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a threat. It was the war call. It started low, a rumble in his chest that shook the concrete floor, and rose to a terrifying crescendo that pierced through the walls, the floors, and the jamming frequencies. It was a sound that bypassed technology and went straight to the bone. All over the compound, and I heard answering howls. The confusion was over. The pack heard the Alpha calling for war. Let's go, Kael said. His eyes were fully gold now, the pain forgotten, replaced by battle fury. We didn't run from the soldiers. We ran at them. Kael shifted mid-sprint, turning into the massive black wolf. He hit the first line of soldiers like a cannonball. He tore through Kevlar and ceramic plating, a blur of teeth and claws. I scooped up an assault rifle dropped by a fallen soldier. Eat lead, you fascists! I opened fire, covering Kael's flank. I wasn't a wolf, but I was a mercenary. I knew how to clear a room. We fought our way out of the bay and into the lower corridors. It was a bloodbath. Wolves were pouring out of the stairwells, clashing with the hunters in the narrow hallways. "Ar to the Great Hall!" Kael Wolf roared, mind-linking me for the first time in 5 years. "We have to protect the pups and elders." We pushed forward. A young wolf, no older than 16, was cornered by 2 soldiers with flamethrowers. "No!" I screamed. I didn't have a shot. Kael was too far ahead. I dropped the rifle, pulled the pin on a flashbang I'd scavenged, and rolled it down the hall. Bang. The blinding white light stunned the soldiers. I sprinted through the smoke, tackling the young wolf and covering him as the soldiers blindly fired their streams of fire. The heat scorched the air above us. Kael looped back. He didn't bite the soldiers. He knocked a support beam loose. The ceiling collapsed on top of them. I coughed, dragging the kid up. "Get to the safe room. Go," he ran. Kael shifted back to human form for a split second. Grabbing my shoulders. Vargas. I saw him running toward the east tower. The helipad, I realized. He's trying to escape. "I have to stop him," Kael said. "If he leaves, he takes the pack codes with him. He'll sell us to the highest bidder again." "Go," I pushed him. "I'll hold the line here." "I'm not leaving you. I'm not the damsel Kael. I'm the shadow. Go kill the bastard." He hesitated, then kissed me hard, a mix of blood and desperation. "Stay alive, mate." He shifted and sprinted toward the east tower stairs. I turned back to the corridor, raising my rifle. "Okay, boys, who's next?" But it wasn't soldiers who came around the corner. A grate in the floor blew open. A gray, hairless hand clawed its way out. Then another, then a metallic, pulsating spine. The ferals. They had survived the tunnel collapse. And they looked hungry. And I checked my ammo clip. Empty. I threw the gun at the lead feral's head. It bounced off with a clang. The creature hissed, its optical sensors locking onto me. Well, I pulled my boot knife, backing up slowly. This is going to suck. Chapter 20. The Alpha's Wrath. A 3-inch boot knife against 3 cybernetic zombie wolves. The math was not in my favor. The lead feral, the one I'd previously introduced to a fan blade, lunged. It was fast, unnatural, its metal spine whirring like a faulty chainsaw. I dodged left, the smell of rotten meat and ozone filling my nose. Its metallic claws sparked against the concrete where my head had been a second before. I slashed at its flank, aiming for the flesh between the armor plates. The blade bit deep. Black, oily blood sprayed out. It didn't even slow down, for it shrieked, a sound that made my teeth ache, and backhanded me with a forearm encased in steel. I flew backward, slamming into the opposite wall. My head cracked against the stone. The world went fuzzy around the edges. My ribs screamed. "Kael!" The thought was involuntary, a desperate pulse sent down a bond I was trying to deny. Pain, trapped, dying. The feral loomed over me, its glowing green optical sensors adjusting, focusing on my throat. It raised a clawed hand. I tried to lift my knife, but my arm wouldn't cooperate. This was it. 5 years of surviving the wilds, only to die in a basement hallway by a science experiment gone wrong. Then the ceiling exploded. It wasn't a figure of speech. Kael, in full alpha wolf form, crashed through the drywall from the floor above, showering the corridor in dust and debris. He didn't land. And he collided. He hit the lead feral with the force of a freight train, driving it into the concrete floor. The sound of metal crunching was sickeningly loud. Kael was a blur of black fur and primal rage. He tore the metallic spine right out of the creature's back. It convulsed and went still. The other two ferals hesitated. Even mindless killing machines knew fear when faced with an enraged alpha. Kael turned on them, a low, vibrating growl emanating from his chest that shook the dust off the pipes. He was magnificent. He was terrifying. He was mine, but he was distracted. He looked back at me, his golden wolf eyes filled with panic, checking if I was alive. That split second of distraction was all the third feral needed. It launched itself from the shadows, aiming not for Kael, but for me, the weak link. Kael saw it move, and he threw himself in front of me, taking the hit meant for my heart. The feral's steel claws punched deep into Kael's side, right below the ribs. Kael roared, a sound of pure agony that shattered the last of the overhead lights, plunging us into near darkness. He collapsed on top of me, his massive weight crushing the air from my lungs, his hot blood soaking through my shirt. Chapter 21. The Turning Point. The weight of him was suffocating. The smell of his blood, copper, and rich earth triggered a panic in me that 5 years of mercenary work hadn't prepared me for. "Kael?" I shoved at his massive shoulder. He didn't move. He was heavy, dead weight. The feral that had stabbed him was trying to retract its claws from his flesh. The metal grated against bone. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a cold, blinding fury. And it was the Luna instinct, dormant for years, waking up and choosing violence. I wriggled out from under Kael. I didn't stand up. I launched myself. I hit the feral just as it pulled free. I didn't go for the armor. I went for the face. I jammed my boot knife directly into one of its glowing green optical sensors. It shrieked, stumbling back, clawing at its own face. I didn't stop. I jumped onto its back, wrapping my legs around its necrotic torso, and drove the knife into the base of its skull, severing the connection between the flesh and the metal spine. It dropped like a stone. I stood up, chest heaving, covered in blood that wasn't mine. The last feral looked at its fallen comrades, looked at me, the crazed human woman with a knife, and turned to flee. A dozen shots rang out. The feral jerked and collapsed as bullets riddled its body. And reinforcements. A squad of pack guards rounded the corner, rifles raised. They stopped dead, staring at the carnage. At the dead monsters. At their fallen alpha. At me. "He's down," one guard yelled, moving toward Kael. Kael shifted back to human form. He was conscious, but barely. The wound in his side was deep, bubbling. "Alpha," the guard whispered, horrified. "Get a medic," I ordered. My voice wasn't my own. It was deeper, resonant, carrying an authority that brooked no argument. "Secure this hallway. 2 men, stay with Kael. The rest of you, on me." They hesitated, looking to the guard captain. "Do as she says," Kael gasped from the floor, gripping the guard's ankle. "She is in command." The guard snapped to attention. The hesitation vanished. "Where are we going, Luna?" the captain asked, giving me the title without thinking. And I scooped up a fallen rifle and checked the magazine. Full. I looked toward the stairs leading to the east tower. "Vargas is still breathing," I said, the wolf inside me howling for retribution. "We're going to fix that." Chapter 22. Justice. The east tower roof was being hammered by rain. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes, but I didn't blink. Vargas was there. He was struggling with the tie-downs on a small, sleek civilian helicopter. He looked panicked, soaked, and pathetic. "Going somewhere?" I shouted over the roar of the wind. Vargas spun around. He saw me, alone, rifle in hand. He pulled his revolver, but he was shaking too hard. "Stay back," he screamed. "I'll shoot. I swear to the goddess, I'll shoot." "You missed last time," I said, walking steadily toward him. I didn't raise my rifle. I didn't need it. And he fired. The bullet pinged off the metal railing beside me. I kept walking. He fired again, wild, into the air. He clicked the trigger a third time. Click, empty. He threw the gun at me in a fit of impotent rage. I dodged it without breaking stride. "It was a good plan, Vargas," I said, stopping 10 feet from him. "Frame me, kill Kael, sell the pack. You almost pulled it off." "It's survival, Lena," he pleaded, backing up against the helicopter. "The world is changing. We have to adapt or die." "You didn't adapt," I said, dropping the rifle. "I wanted to do this with my hands." "You sold your family for a comfortable seat on the Titanic." He lunged. He wasn't a fighter, but desperation made him dangerous. He went for my throat. I sidestepped, grabbing his wrist and using his own momentum to slam him face first into the side of the helicopter. Metal dented, cartilage crunched. He crumpled to the wet tarmac, groaning, blood pouring from his nose. I stood over him. It would be so easy. A quick twist of the neck, a shove off the roof. 5 years of exile, of pain, of loneliness. It all demanded blood. I grabbed him by the lapels of his expensive, ruined suit and dragged him to the edge of the roof. His feet dangled over the abyss. He screamed, clawing at my hands. "Please," he begged. "Lena, please, I'll give you anything. Money, contacts." "I don't want your money," I hissed, leaning him further over the edge. The image of Kael lying in the hallway, bleeding out because he jumped in front of me, flashed in my mind. Vargas deserved to fall, but I wasn't the executioner, not here. Not today. I pulled him back from the ledge and threw him onto the tarmac. He curled into a ball, sobbing. "Get up," I commanded, disgust thick in my voice. I grabbed him by the back of his collar and started dragging him toward the stairs. "Where are you taking me?" he whimpered. "To the Alpha," I said. "Judgment Day is today, Vargas, and you're late." Chapter 23. The Kneel. The great hall was silent. The fighting was over. The hunters had retreated once their shock troops were decimated. The pack stood in the ruins of their home, dust coating the overturned tables, moonlight streaming through the broken windows. They parted as I dragged Vargas through the center aisle. He was limp, defeated, leaving a trail of rainwater and blood on the stone floor. At the end of the hall, Kael sat on the dais steps. He had refused to go to the infirmary. Silas, now working under the watchful eye of 3 very large guards, had patched him up in the field. He was shirtless, a thick bandage wrapped around his ribs, his face pale under the grime, but his eyes were clear. The gold was back, brighter than ever. I threw Vargas at Kael's feet. The traitor groaned, not daring to look up. Kael didn't look at Vargas. He looked at me. He looked at the blood on my clothes, the rifle slung over my shoulder, the way the pack stood behind me, waiting for my signal. "It's done," I said, my voice echoing in the silence. "The threat is neutralized." Kael nodded slowly. He stood up, wincing slightly, and looked down at his former beta. "Vargas," Kael's voice was low, devoid of anger, filled only with a terrifying finality. "For treason against the pack. For the murder of your kin. For the betrayal of your Alpha." Kael didn't make a speech. He didn't draw it out. He reached down, grabbed Vargas by the neck with one hand, and with a sickening crack, ended it. He let the body fall. The pack watched, silent. Justice had been served. Then, Kael did something that made the entire room gasp. He turned to me. He took 3 slow, painful steps down from the dais until he was standing right in front of me. And then, the Alpha of the Blackwood pack dropped to his knees. The silence became suffocating. Alphas did not kneel. Ever. Kael looked up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears, stripping himself bare before his people. "I exiled the innocent," he said, his voice rough, carrying to every corner of the hall. "I hunted my mate, and I allowed a snake to poison my house because I was too arrogant to see the truth." He reached into his boot and pulled out a silver dagger, his Alpha dagger. He reversed the grip and held the hilt out to me, baring his neck in the ultimate sign of submission. "I have failed you, Lena," he whispered, his gaze unwavering. "I have failed this pack. My life is yours to take. Judge me." I stared at the dagger. I stared at the man who had broken my heart 5 years ago, now offering me his life in penance. The pack held its collective breath, waiting to see if their Luna would execute their Alpha. I reached out and wrapped my hand around the hilt of the blade. Chapter 24. The New Era. The silver handle of the dagger was cold against my palm, a stark contrast to the heat radiating from Kael's kneeling form. And the entire great hall held its breath. 500 wolves watched, waiting to see if their returning exile would become their Alpha's executioner. Kael's eyes were closed. His neck was bared, the pulse jugular thumping rhythmically beneath the skin. He wasn't flinching. He wanted this. He wanted the release of the blade, the final atonement for 5 years of failure. It would be so easy. A quick thrust, and the pain of the last half-decade would be balanced in blood. I tightened my grip on the hilt until my knuckles turned white. Then I drew my arm back and threw the dagger as hard as I could across the hall. It spun through the air, embedding itself with a loud thwack in the heavy oak doors of the entrance. Kael flinched at the sound, his eyes flying open. He looked at the dagger, then up at me, our confusion warring with the sorrow in his gaze. "Get up," I commanded, my voice flat, echoing off the stone walls. He didn't move. "Lena, the law of the pack demands—" "To hell with the law," I snapped. stepping closer until my boots were inches from his knees. You don't get the easy way out, Kael. Dying is simple. You did that 5 years ago when you let Vargas poison your mind. Living, fixing the mess you made, that's hard. And you owe me hard work for the rest of your miserable life. A murmur ran through the pack. Alphas didn't get lectured, but I wasn't just anyone. Kael slowly got to his feet. He towered over me again, battered, bloody, and magnificent. But the dynamic had shifted forever. He wasn't looking down at me, he was looking at me. Tell me what to do, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Start, I said. I tilting my head to the side, bearing the scar tissue on my neck where a mate mark should have been 5 years ago. By finishing what you started. His breath hitched. The scent of him flared, rain, cedar, and an overwhelming wave of possessive need. The heat that had been simmering between us since the dungeon, the bond that had survived exile and war, finally snapped the last restraint. He didn't be gentle. He didn't ask permission. He grabbed my shoulders, pulling me against his wounded chest, and buried his face in my neck. His teeth grazed the sensitive skin, sending electric jolts down my spine. Then he bit down. Hard. I gasped, clinging to him as the pain and pleasure crashed through me. The bond, previously a frayed, neglected thread, slammed into place like a steel trap. It was a rush of shared emotion, shared power, shared soul. I felt his guilt, his relief, and his overwhelming, terrifying love for me. I didn't just take it. I dug my nails into his back, finding the skin over his heart, and I bit him back. I claimed him with the same ferocity he had used on me. We stood there in the center of the ruined hall, covered in grime and blood, bound together finally, irrevocably. Sunrise found us on the balcony of the penthouse, overlooking the estate. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean but scarred. Below, the pack was already working. The sounds of hammers and saws drifted up as they began to repair the breaches. They moved differently now, no longer looking over their shoulders for an internal threat. I leaned against the stone railing, my body aching in places I didn't know existed. Kael stood behind me, his arms wrapped around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. The new mark on my neck throbbed in time with his heartbeat against my back. Vargas was right about one thing, Kael murmured, watching the perimeter wall being rebuilt. The world is changing. The hunters know we're vulnerable now. They won't stop coming. It wasn't a happily ever after. The house was half destroyed, our numbers were decimated, and we had enemies on all sides. I covered his hands with mine, feeling the calluses and the strength in them. Let them come, I said, watching the sun burn the mist off the distant tree line. We broke, Kael, but they forgot that broken bones heal stronger. I turned in his arms, looking up at the alpha who had banished me, the warrior I had saved, the mate I had claimed. We're Blackwood, I whispered fiercely, and we're just getting started.
And that is where we leave them for today. If you enjoyed that, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell turned on. It really helps the channel grow and ensures you're the first to know when the next story drops. Thank you so much for spending your time with Z's Romance. I'll catch you in the next one. Stay fierce, Z.